Okay, so welcome to learning about basic photo corrections in Photoshop. So the first thing we're going to do here is download the following exercise file, which is 02start.tif. So go ahead and click on that, and it will go ahead and put that in your downloads folder. The next thing I want you to do is to be able to access the instructions, just click on the pop-out icon so you can open that in a new window and you'll be able to see it a lot clearer and larger. What I also do is go ahead and pin it to the right-hand side so I can see my instructions on the right. And then on this left-hand side here, I'll have Photoshop open. Okay, so what we're going to do here are a few items as far as photo corrections goes. We're going to learn how to open up Adobe Bridge. We'll go ahead and crop and straighten. And we'll use some various tools to help enhance the photo that we're going to work with. So scrolling down on the instructions, you can see an example here of what we will be doing. So the one right behind is the original, and then the one right on top is what we will be working towards. So what I'll have you do next is go ahead on the bottom left, type in Photoshop to open up Photoshop. And once that opens up, we'll go ahead and access Bridge. So it's another way to organize your files, to help you preview files and look up information on images that you will be working with. Okay, so once this opens up, you're going to go to File, you're going to Browse in Bridge. I'm going to wait for that to open up a little bit. And once we have that open, we can see some files here already. What I want you to do, I know mine shows my first and last name, but click on your ID number, and then you're going to double click on your downloads folder because this is where we're going to find the file that we're going to work with. When you just click that once and just make sure the preview is selected, you'll be able to view the file that you're working with. You can even zoom in on parts of it if you'd like. But what you can also do is take a look at information on the file. So when the file was created, at what time, the size of the file, dimensions. If we were working with a raw file, we can see even more information about that. The main one I would look at is the exposure of the file. Okay, so now that we're in Bridge, we'll go ahead and double click on that. We'll click on our exercise file, and we can go ahead and close out Bridge because we are going to use that later on. In this chapter on this page, it talks about resolution and image size, so I'll give you a chance to take a look at that information so you get a better understanding of pixels and how that works out. What we are going to go ahead and do, and we already did opening a file with Adobe Bridge, we are now going to go ahead and save our file. So right now it is a .tif file, and we're going to go ahead and save it as a PSD. So we're going to go to File, Save As, and we want to make sure to change this to Photoshop. So the Save As type, change that to Photoshop, and we're going to change Start to Working. And if you notice up here, it's going to be in our downloads folder for now until I specify for future projects and files where it's going to go. So go ahead and click Save. So at the top here, you can see that we changed the name of the file. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and start straightening and cropping the image in Photoshop. To do so, we're going to go ahead and select our crop tool right over here. So we're going to click on that, and we're going to go ahead and change the options at the top. So notice we have all of these different options. So if yours says ratio, go ahead and change that to width times height times resolution. And then we're going to make sure this says 7 inches. Mine already says that, but I'll just type it in. So change that to 7, change this to 7, and we're going to work with 200 pixels per inch. So as you can see, a grid appears once you have entered that. The next thing we're going to do is click on the straighten icon. So here we have the word straighten, and we're going to go ahead and click on the straighten icon. So I'm going to click on that once. And the nice thing with this, we can look for an area here. So notice this is the horizontal part of our image. I'm just going to go ahead and click this corner right here. So I'm going to click and drag a line and making sure that it's lined up from one corner to the other. Now by doing so, and I release, it helps straighten out the photo. So once I have that completed, I'm going to now go ahead and crop the photo so we're just left with the image on the inside. So I'll take one of these handlebars, I'm going to drag it in. So if it goes inside of the photo a little bit, that's perfectly fine. I'll drag this one up, just a little bit up. I'll drag this one into the left, a little bit to the left here. And the other one, a little bit. Make my window just a little bit bigger so you could see the check mark. There it is. I'm going to go ahead and check that off. And there's my image. I'll go ahead and do a Control-0 just so you could see it a little bit bigger. Okay, so moving along, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the bottom left corner. So here, for number 8, it says that you can take a look at the document dimensions. So if I were to click on this arrow down here, I can click on document dimensions, and it just shows that I have a 7" by 7" image that's 200 pixels per inch. And it always helps to save your work. So you can go to File, Save, or Control-S to quickly save the image. So the next thing we're going to go ahead and do is adjust the color and tone. And this is one of my favorite ways to go ahead and adjust the image without having to do a whole lot of editing. So let me go ahead and scroll this out so you can see my panels here. The first thing we're going to go ahead and do is choose the curves adjustment layer. So I'm going to click on that. And notice you have these different eyedropper tools here. So you can sample a black point, a gray point, and a white point. So we're going to click on setting a white point. Let me go ahead and do that. And then I'm going to click on, let's say, the white of the stripe on this girl's dress here. So I'm going to click on that. And notice how much it brightens up the image. Okay, so it's not a really big adjustment that we're doing, but notice we did make it enough to where you brighten it. So if I hide the visibility, so I click on the curves layer, notice this is the original. And this one here is the what we have next. Okay, so after adjusting the white point, what we're going to go ahead and do is move on to the levels icon in the adjustments panel. So when I go back over here, I'm going to go to my adjustments, and the levels is right next to the curves. So we originally did curves, now we're going to adjust the levels. Okay, so what we're going to go ahead and do here, and let me scroll down so you can see the numbers here. We're going to go with what is called a histogram, and we're going to change the shadow tones, and we'll also change the midtones. So for example, when I go back over here to Photoshop, we can drag these arrows over. So I'm going to drag this over to 15, and notice how you can see it change in the contrast, a change in some of the shadows. And then I'm going to go ahead and change this over to 90, around 90. Okay. So now we have adjusted the levels. If you notice, if I go too far to the left, it gets too overexposed. If I bring this over here too far to the right, it gets a little too dark. So We're trying to make it look as natural as possible. Let me bring it back to 15. And that's what we'll do for now as far as making any enhancements to the image. So what we're going to do next is for number 7 here, choose a layer and flatten the image. The reason for this, it helps merge all of this together. So when we start doing our other edits, such as removing any spots or removing another person, it will just remain on this layer rather than going on these other 2 layers. So to flatten the image, you're going to go to Layer over here at the top, and then go all the way down to Flatten Image. So when I go ahead and look at my layers, it's all merged together into one layer. Okay, so moving along here, what we're going to go ahead and take a look at is working with the spot healing brush. So the spot healing brush tool will be a band-aid on this side. So right now mine is not showing. I have a patch tool here instead. So I'm going to hold down on my left click and I'm going to select the spot healing brush tool. Okay, so what that's going to do, we're going to take a look at this line right over here and we're going to go ahead and get rid of that. So we'll go ahead and take a look at our size of the brush and the amount of hardness that we want on the brush. We also want to make sure that up here content aware is selected, because what that's going to do is take a look at the surrounding areas in the image and match that. So to change the size of the brush, just go up to the options at the top here. So I'll click on that. I already have it set to 25, so just make sure yours is set to 25. We'll go ahead and keep it at 100% as well over here. And then looking back at the options, we'll keep this normal, content aware is selected. So this is the size of my brush. I'm going to go ahead and hover over this line in the sky, and I'm going to carefully, as best as I can, just go over this line that I see in the sky. And I'll just stop right here. So notice you can see that it disappeared. It copied anything that was around it. So that's the idea of content aware. So it becomes aware of the environment. So notice this spot, I just clicked once just to clean that up. So I'm going to click this one. So it's matching anything by the bridge. I'll click down here. It'll match anything that's down here in the water. And then for this, I'll continue on all the way to the bottom, just really making sure I'm following along the line, this vertical line here, to help repair what's going on there. So once I have that done, once again, it's just being aware of what's surrounding it, and that line has now disappeared. And that is using the spot healing brush tool. So what I want you to also notice, when we look at the sky, there's going to be another spot there that we need to clean up. So it's right over here on the upper right area. So I'm going to go ahead and clean that up. And now it matches the surrounding area in the sky. The next thing we're going to go ahead and work with is the content aware patch. So what we'll go ahead and do is, instead of using the spot healing brush tool, we're going to change that to the, click on this option here, change that to the patch tool. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and take a look at our options at the top here. So we're going to keep it at a type 4. And then what we're going to go ahead and do, just like the sample here, we're going to go ahead and trace around the figure as best as we can. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and make sure we have content aware chosen. We're at structure 4. And what I'm going to go ahead and do next is just trace around my image here. So make sure that you do include the shadow. So I'll trace around him as best as I can. So those of you using your laptops, obviously it's a little tricky if you're not using a mouse. So I have my figure traced, and what you're going to do next is hover over the figure. So notice there's an extra arrow that has appeared. So when I click and drag to the left, the figure starts to disappear to the right. So now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to keep on going this way until he no longer appears in the image. And I'm going to decide, do I want my bricks to line up, or do I want the area by the building to line up? So I'm actually going to line up the bricks on the bridge here. And once you're pretty happy with that, notice the figure is now gone. Now, what we're going to do next is deselect our image. So we're going to go to Control D, and we're going to use what is called a clone stamp tool. So when I go to my toolbar to the left, I have my clone stamp tool right here. I'll go ahead and select that. And the idea of the clone stamp tool is to clean up any areas that are a little too obvious as far as still being able to see the silhouette as if something was supposed to be there. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and change the size of the brush. We'll make that at 30. We'll make the hardness 30%. We'll make the size of the brush 60. So when I go to my options up here at the top, I'm going to change this here to 60. And then right now I already have it at 30%. And the way this tool works, you want to make sure that you hold down on the Alt key. And the reason for that, when you hold down on the Alt key and you have your brush hovered over a certain area, so let's say that I hover right over here, it's going to target an area that you want to copy. So let's say I want to copy this. I'll go ahead and click on it, and notice my brush has copied that area. So you can see that in the sky. So now what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to go ahead and repeat that until I have a nice continuous line. Trying to make sure it's not too obvious, but clean enough to where it disguises that discontinued area that I had. Okay, so I'll just continue right over here. And there we have it. But now what you notice, it did overlap here. So I'm going to go ahead and fix that part. So let's say that I want to copy perhaps this part. I'm going to hold down on Alt. I'm going to target this area, tap once, and then I'm going to move it over here. So maybe I want the darker part of the bridge. So all I'm doing is following this brush here. Maybe I want it to match this. So I'm trying to make it not as obvious as possible as far as the edit goes. Okay, so notice I cleaned that part up a little bit more. But now up here, the buildings are looking a little bit odd because you have a repetition from here over here. So what I'll do instead, I'm going to copy this part of the window and just repeat it all the way across. So notice how these windows are repeated. So I'll do the same with this. So hold down on Alt. I'll target, let's say, this section right here. So I'm going to move it over. And I'll just go ahead and repeat that. So I'm just going to continue repeating that. I'll stop there. Go ahead and recopy this part here. just to clean up this area. Try that again. Just trying to clean up that window, and I think that works out pretty well. So now I have to decide, what do I want going on in this bottom area? So maybe I want this part to repeat also. So I'll target here. I'll just repeat this going across. Just making sure it's all nicely lined up. And there you have it. So I'll continue working with this bottom part here just to see, what kind of adjustments I need to make for my image. All right, so now that we've finished adjusting some parts of the bridge here, we can also take a look at the bottom and see if there's any little tweaks or adjustments we need to make. So I'm going to take a look at this corner here. I'm going to go ahead and hold down on Alt. I'll target this little corner, and I'll go ahead and copy that over here so you can see that a little bit better. So you can go back and forth and making any adjustments just to make it look like it's nice and seamless. Everything seems to flow. So when you look at it just at a quick glance, you can't tell that you just took someone right directly out of the photo in this section. Okay, so moving along in our instructions, and once again, always make sure to save your work because you never know if something's going to happen. So I'll go ahead and save that. We're going to go ahead and sharpen the image. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and zoom into this young man's shirt here. I'll go ahead and click on my magnifier glass and make sure I have it zoomed in here. I'll go ahead and select this area here. So I'm going to zoom in at about 400. So you can tell how much you're zooming in by the number down in the bottom left. So I'm going to go ahead, and notice you can zoom in a whole lot. I didn't mean to zoom in that much. Just trying to go about here. So what we're looking at are these little specks, and we want to clean that up also. All right, so the way that we're going to go ahead and do that, we're going to choose Filter, Noise, Dust, and Scratches. So once again, at the top here, you go to Filter, Noise, Dust, and Scratches. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and keep the radius at 1. We'll keep the threshold at 0. And it's hopefully going to pick up all these little pixels and clean that up. So we'll click OK. And now you don't see all of those little bright blue specks anymore. What we'll go ahead and do next is make sure to sharpen our image. So we're going to go ahead and go to Filter, Sharpen, Smart Sharpen, and right here it says Remove Lens Blur. So looking back at our instructions here, we are going to go ahead and choose this one. There's also others that we can choose, but lens blur will be the one that will work best for this photo. We're going to make sure the amount is 60% and the radius is 1.5. And then once you click on that, it should sharpen up your image a little bit more. Obviously, you won't be able to see that right now, but once we zoom out, you're not going to see as many specks on there. And then we could click File, Save, just to make sure we save the image. I'm going to do a Control-0 to zoom out. And notice it is a lot sharper than we had it before. So this is some different ways that we can start cleaning up images without going into a whole lot of detail of editing. And you'll still be able to have a nice clean image that's nice and sharp.